Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, your guide to motorsports sponsorship. Here's your host, Josh Weesey.
Welcome to this episode of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by AMSOIL. Today, we're going to be talking about if it really matters what motorsports discipline you are involved with. So there's a lot of disciplines that we've had on this show, whether it's Jeep or ATV, UTV, dirt bike, there's just a ton. We're going to talk about that. What does it really mean? What are the fundamental similarities? What are the nuances? Either way, we're going to talk through all that in a little bit. But first, I need to tell you a little bit about AMSOIL. So if you haven't heard of AMSOIL, you've been living under a rock, and you definitely haven't listened to this show before. But AMSOIL does a lot for the racing community. They are involved with a number of race programs. They support this show and a number of other shows too. But on top of that, they make really good products. So you can check out those products at amsoil.com/rider. And I also need to tell you about a couple of our other partners that make this show possible. SolderWeld, they produce game-changing metal bonding technology. TopThePodium.com, they're experts in motorsports sponsorship. Bold Racing, they're a family race team and GSP XTV axle specialists. Crash Addict Industries, they provide human protection and extreme racing products. I also want to give a shout out to some of our other partners, including MBRP, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, GSP XTV, and High Octane Coffee. If you're getting value out of the show, or if you want to just give me your feedback, head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review. If you're not on iTunes, you can always head over to the Facebook page and leave a rating and review there. So the Facebook page is Sponsored Rider Club Podcast. And if you want to join a community where you can share best practices, head over to the Sponsored Rider Club on Facebook. It is a group you can request to join and immediately start asking questions. All right, that's it. I am ready to get into the content of this show. Okay, so the topic, the thing we're going to talk about today is, does your discipline really matter in motorsports sponsorship? There are differences, there are nuances. We're going to kind of talk through those things because I obviously market this show to a lot of different types of, riders and racers, things like that. It's actually made it difficult for me to justify the name of the show anymore because I've started branching into all sorts of different things. It's called the Sponsored Rider Club Podcast. Very early on, my intent was just to talk about the people who are riding something, right? ATV, a snowmobile. I did have the thought of UTV and some of those other ones, but I really wanted to focus on, the people who are riding something, right? When sometimes if you're behind the seat of a vehicle, you think of it as driving. So, as I've kind of done 152 shows, I think this is going to be in 153 when it's released. It's just really opened that up to me that there's a lot of, fundamental similarities, but yet still a lot of differences there. So we're going to talk through all of that so you better understand it. My focus, though, and my ask of you is that you can go ahead and cross over the different boundaries of disciplines. I would love it if you're a backcountry snowmobiler. I'd love it if you listened to one of our truck or Jeep shows. And if you are a truck or Jeeper, I think it would be great if you listened to one of our UTV shows. There's a lot of things that you can learn, and there's some different ways you might be able to look at your program as a result. So we're going to talk through those things. I kind of want to start it off talking about racing. Honestly, like I said earlier, when I first started doing this, I was really focused on the rider, and backcountry was part of that, but racing was really where I was going to target a lot of my shows. And I have done a ton of racing focus because that's honestly where the first element of, my excitement and where I think most people think about. That's the discipline people think about as racing when they're talking about motorsports sponsorship. So I want to talk about actually like 3 different types. There's no way I'm going to cover it all in this episode. We would be here all night. So I'm just going to give you tidbits, examples of, different categories and of these disciplines. Like, if you're listening to this and I miss your discipline, it's not on purpose. I'm just picking some of the ones that I'm most familiar with. But yeah, I kind of see the racing environment. It's a little bit more focused on winning, right? The competition is pretty strong. Not that backcountry and the non-racing type activities are not competition based, because there still is a lot of personal development that takes place in those things, skill based, competition based. But really, I'm talking about like the element of you got a first, second, third podium, things like that. Very clear definition of if you're winning or not winning. But I'm going to talk about 3 categories really, and that's desert racing, which desert racing has been a pretty big focus for the show. On the track with multi-racers, so a picture of supercross environment with a bunch of different racers on the track at the same time, and then a track with 1 or 2 racers focused, so time attack or a one-on-one race. So we're going to talk about those different things and some of the even nuances between those. So first off, desert. I'm going to start there because honestly that's one of the bigger bases for this audience is the desert racers. You can be an ATV, UTV, dirt bike, trophy truck. Is different variations of vehicles that you could run in a desert race. And every one of those has a little bit of their nuances. Some of them have more real estate, right? Like a trophy truck has more real estate for logos, and it's also typically requires a much higher price tag than if you're running, even a UTV, but definitely more than an ATV or dirt bike. But there's still some fundamental elements here from a desert standpoint. One of them is that the audience doesn't usually have the ability to watch the entire race. You go out into the desert and you lose them. A lot of these bigger teams might have abilities to have filming crews go to the different pit stops. They might have a helicopter that can fall through and create content. And there are some live streaming applications in some of the desert races that you can get a decent idea what's going on, but rarely can you see or follow the race the whole time, which means you're not sitting in a stadium and you're not able to constantly see whatever vehicle you're tracking. So from a valuation standpoint, from a sponsorship standpoint, what's the visibility of the vehicle? You can't rely as much on someone watching it and seeing the whole race. You do have to then pull in how you show at the tech inspection, how your chase trucks are set up, visually, and then what other vehicles are you there with? Like I said earlier, helicopters, maybe it's your other support vehicles. How are they wrapped? They have logos on them. You get a little bit of that because those vehicles are very visible, especially to other racers. Social media becomes massive. When we get to the fundamentals, you're going to hear social media again, but social media gets pretty big from the desert standpoint because, like I said, you can't see the whole race. And then race reports. What happens while you're out in the desert? I think that race reports for a desert race they're pretty critical. Not that they're not critical for other elements of a racing environment, but people just don't know what's happening unless you tell them, even in some of the best case scenarios. So that's kind of a couple elements of the desert race, a couple of nuances there. The track multi-racer is the next category I want to talk about. And, a lot of people very quickly will think of supercross, so dirt bikes, arena cross, ATV, there's different ATV MX type courses, short course, stadium trucks, anything where there's a vehicle that you can watch the entire race on, and there's multiple racers. I guess NASCAR is a really good example of that too, or any other type of circle track, dirt track. So picturing that, you typically have a stadium. You have maybe it's an infield, you have an outfield, you have pits set up specifically. People are going to be able to see your crew all the time. So what they're wearing might be critical. What tools you're using in the pits might be critical from a visibility standpoint. It gives you that element where there's people watching, the race. So the number of people who attend that event become more critical when you're doing sponsorship valuations and reporting that out to your sponsors. So yeah, I think that's a big piece of it. But the next piece is that attention is divided. So during a racer activity like that, typically you being an audience member can't follow every racer. There's a certain time where you have to focus on somebody, and maybe your attention is distracted, you start focusing on somebody else. And honestly, the top 5, top 3 racers are the ones that get a lot of that attention. So if you're talking about screen time, television footage, they're going to spend a lot of time tracking whoever's in the lead. So I think that the winning element of a multi-racer track activity are pretty critical. And that's probably one of the most well-known applications, which again kind of shows that from a valuation standpoint, and that's one of the big ones. Taking advantage of all those stats in your program and how you report that and track it is pretty critical when you're in a multi-racer track environment. The next category I really wanted to bring up here is the track that is a time attack or a one-on-one activity. So what I mean by this is, a lot of the, like Arena Cross, for example, will have 2 racers just face off, and it's almost like between the main event, they'll bring some of the top racers out and do one-on-one. Well, it's pretty good because you get to see and focus on just those 2. Like, it's pretty difficult to get distracted for something else because the focus is all on them. Monster Jam does this where, for freestyle events, they have 1 vehicle out there, or for the races, they typically only have 2. Drag racing is, 1 or 2 based off of how the event is set up. Autocross, same way. Tractor pull, same way. So you have this event where when you're out there doing whatever it is that you do, there is 1 person, typically that's the main focus. I guess hill climb activities for snowmobiling is the same way. I think this is a good opportunity to show that the audience can be focused on you. So if it is 2-3 minutes that you're out there doing something, that's 2-3 minutes where you likely have the entire audience's attention, or at least a certain percentage of it, much greater percentage than if you were to divide it amongst a multi-racer event. So if you are reporting out on stats to your sponsor, or you're building a pitch, you might be able to use that. Okay, so I have an event where I do drag racing. There's 500 people that attend this event each year. So I'm expecting 400 people to be watching me when I'm out on the track. So I think that's another element, just kind of differentiates what racing environments might look like. So those are just the 3 categories I wanted to talk about on racing, and I just think that there's probably like a million other nuances that I'm not going to get into right now, but I just want to give you that overview so you kind of understood the difference. So at this point, though, I am going to take a quick minute to thank the sponsors for this podcast, and then we're going to come back and talk about some of the non-racing categories. 2 questions I get continuously about this show and about sponsorship is, do I need my own website and do I need a resume? The answer is, in my opinion, yes to both, and that's why we partner with TopThePodium.com. Now, if you want to see an example of what a professional website and what a professional resume looks like, you gotta check out TopThePodium.com. They did my website. The Sponsored Rider Club Podcast website is SponsoredRiderClubPodcast.com. That was created by Jeff Vanistall of TopThePodium.com. I think it's awesome. I get a lot of good feedback about it. And there's a number of other websites out there that Jeff has produced that are just phenomenal. So I think it's important in this world of social media where you have control of your content. That's what a website does. It gives you full control. We don't know what Facebook's going to do sometimes. We don't know what Instagram's going to do. We don't know what Twitter's going to do. So if we don't have that central location to direct people and house our content, there is some risk that we incur. So I strongly recommend getting a website, talking to TopThePodium.com. And then The resume, again, is massive, and if you want to stand out, get it done professionally. And honestly, it is one of the best ways to step up your game and present yourself in the best way possible. Safety is our overriding priority. I hear it all the time, but I have to ask myself, is it though? Is that the first thing we think of? Is that the first thing you think of? Over the past couple of years, we've seen the performance of production UTVs increase, somewhere around 350%. That means these machines give us a lot more opportunity to have fun and win races, but it also, unfortunately, gives us new opportunities to crash. And that's why we have partnered with Crash Addict Industries. The owner, Travis Pointer, became very accustomed to crashing early in his career. He saw it as inevitable, and he set out to make the process safer. With a passion for racing, welding, and engineering, Crash Addict Industries now produces full cage and other protection systems intentionally designed to protect you during an accident on the track. They also offer a line of human protection products through their vendors. Do this for me at this point. If you're racing with a stock cage right now, please go check out CrashAddict.com and at least just see what they have to offer. Even if you choose to go with a different company, please make safety your overriding priority.
Hey guys, George Hamill here to talk about SolderWeld's new off-road repair kit. If you're a racer of any type or an off-road enthusiast like myself, you're going to want to take a close look at this product that bonds metal on the spot. SolderWeld has combined some of their most elite products into one small kit that fits perfectly under your seat or strapped to a roll cage and allows you to make some insane fixes anywhere you go. How many of us have been in a race or out on the trail and got a rock chip in a radiator or brake line? We have seen a top-tier desert race team at the 2019 Min 400 taken out by a simple rock to the radiator. If they had an off-road repair kit on board, they could have been back up and running in just minutes. The kit includes everything you need to work on dirty aluminum, stainless steel, copper, and many other metals. SolderWeld's cutting-edge technology allows you to make these fixes with extremely low heat and incredibly high tensile strength, leaving you a lasting fix every time. Don't be that guy broke down on the side of the trail. Get your off-road repair kit today, and your friends will thank you.
Family race team. Those are the first words that come to mind when I think of Bold Racing. And the next one is actually axles. Bold Racing is a premier distributor of GSP XTV axles. And if that wasn't cool enough, they just came out with an entirely new axle called the Revolution axle. It is a hollow tube axle. It's really cool. If you head over to their website, gspxtv.com, or you can find out more at boldracingltd.com, you can find out how this new axle technology works. So they are saying to view this as a fuse for your drivetrain. So the hollow tube CV axle twist technology actually increases the strength and reliability of the axle, and it also reduces stress on the drivetrain. Plus, honestly, it's super cool looking, and if people know me, they know that I really like cool looking stuff. So they come in this really cool gold color. Check it out. It's absolutely revolutionary. All right, welcome back. We are ready to talk about the next major section of the show, which is the non-racing group. Now that's, adventure, the weekend warrior, influencer. I've done shows in the past where I talk about weekend warrior. I talk about what influencer marketing really is. That's what this is. That's the category we're talking about now. It's a little bit harder to define than what I guess we're typically used to from the racing environment, but it's pretty doggone popular right now. I always reference the backcountry snowmobiler as the great person that represents this group. And it's been part of the show since the very early episodes. But recently I started getting into some other things. What does a show vehicle look like? What are these destination and capability vehicles like? What do they do from an influencer standpoint? So we're going to talk a little bit more about those and some of the nuances associated with it. But I'm going to start with actually, I guess, where the whole thing started for me, which is the backcountry riders. This is a skills-based application And it's also based off of getting just like crazy good content. The backcountry rider, I guess, really prides themselves on getting that just perfect shot. The great sunlight, great snow conditions. Maybe it's a big jump or a real technical trick, or just, something that most people can't see, right? I think that's one of the big draws to the backcountry piece. But what I just said there is that people can't usually see it. So the challenge that the backcountry rider has to work through is that there's usually no audience physically there. I mean, you're riding with somebody the majority of the time. If not, you need to start riding with somebody. So maybe you've got a film crew, maybe it's a group of people that are with you, but the audience is normally limited. So very different from someone at a circle track. It's harder to really use that number as part of your sponsorship valuations. So those groups have to lean a little bit more on some of the other elements. Maybe it's events, maybe it's social media. I mean, social media is probably the big one for this group, and just general content creation. A lot of that does get shared on social media, but I feel like there's a lot more storytelling that has to happen from the backcountry standpoint as compared to some of the other ones. From a race standpoint, yeah, there's a story to tell, no doubt. But, you have the race, that you can actually document, and it tells that story for you. I think if you're a backcountry, you have to build that in some sort of content. So that's I think the fundamental one that I wanted to start with here. The next thing I want to talk about is just the general show vehicles. I think of some people we've had in the show. We talked to folks from the Diesel podcast, 4x4 Barbie. There's other ones that purpose-built vehicles just for a show. The intent is not to beat these things up. It's not to drive them a million miles somewhere. It's not to race them. It's not to push them beyond their limits. It is to make a truly beautiful vehicle that, the craftsmanship shows, the care shows, and, this is it's a category. It's an influencer category for sure. With this one, just like with probably happens with another category we're talking about, but the build is so important. You start with the vehicle and you bring people along that journey. Maybe it's a lot of how-to videos. Maybe it's just, what are the parts that you could use? How great do they look once they're installed? I think the build is a large part of the story. It seems to me, now I don't have any data or evidence to back this up, but it seems to me that a lot of the show vehicles out there, people will have for, 1 or 2 seasons, and they're ready to build another one, right? They've made it their own, and it's time to either tear that one apart and, tweak it, change it, make it new, or start with a whole new vehicle, because I think that's where a lot of the content comes in from this standpoint. There is a competitive nature to it, just like racing. There's typically awards, best in show or whatever it may be, and that can drive some additional exposure from media coverage or other things like that. But a lot of these are very event based. I mean, the competition is an event, and you can probably gauge how many people are at that event, but how many people actually then walk past your vehicle. That's difficult. A lot of the show vehicles can link up with partners in their, whether it's a tent or a booth and something like that, and show the vehicle there, which is pretty cool. But social media is massive for this environment. They have to rely a lot on social media to stay relevant and share that story. Okay, the last one I want to talk about is something that it's probably the newest element of this show that I've been exploring, specifically with some of the more recent guests that are Jeepers. I've recently got into the Jeep community as well, and I'm exploring a lot of this myself. So just through my social media content and my Jeep, I'm playing around with a build, documenting a build right now. I'm playing around with documenting my adventures. And there's something to that, right? There's a lot of similarities to what we just talked about in backcountry and show vehicles, but there's a different element of what I'm going to call this destination, this capability vehicle segment. And I mentioned Jeep because I think that's just something I'm into right now, and I've done, I think, 3 shows on it recently. But there's others as well. There's a special element of these Broncos out there, Ford Broncos, Toyota Tacomas, purpose-built rock crawlers, purpose-built sand rails, any type of sand dune vehicle that's purpose-built. I think that there's a huge segment around this whole destination theme, and I think right now too, honestly, the overland is just massive out there. There's a huge market for overlanding. And, that is a lot of storytelling as well. I do think that these types of vehicles can leverage the product performance to a pretty big extent, especially if you're talking about durability, and also just the overall aesthetics and the feeling that it creates and the experience that it creates. So it's not an all-out race, and a lot of times there's not a ton of people watching you do it. But you leverage that social media, you leverage events, and you can still make that mark out there. So either way, I think that that's a pretty unique category on its own, but still has a lot of those similarities to the other ones we've discussed. So that is really the things I want to cover that had just a little bit of the nuances, right? Some of the differences between some of the similarities I kind of touched on, but now I really want to dive into the fundamentals. I think that the nuances are something you can study and learn across the different disciplines, but these are the fundamentals that you're going to find all of the time. Now, I probably going to miss some of these as well because, after doing all these shows, I found out that there's just so much you can do, so much you can think about in the world of motorsports marketing and sponsorship. But in this case, I just want to hit the big ones. Relationships. Like, this does not change anywhere. Honestly, even going into your work environment, your social life, your love life, relationships is just key. It's critical. Whether you're racing or backcountry riding, any of these things, that's super critical if you want to have a successful program. And when I say successful, I think of something that you can afford to do without being overall stressed out. So it means you have the good financial support. I think that it's still fun. It's purpose built for you. It's makes you feel good. That's what I mean. You have success. So if you have a good partnership that helps you with all of those elements, like, perfect. But that does not change. Next thing is mindset. That doesn't change for any of this. That's goal setting. That's personal development. If you're listening to this show, I already know that you got this figured out, because you would not be listening to this show unless you were, intensely focused on, bettering yourself and bettering your race program or your sponsorship program. But that is also a big fundamental. And those two I talk about on every single show, every time, like without fail. Next piece, no surprise here, social media. Every single one of these things requires a social media presence. It is one of the first things that a sponsor is going to talk to you about, at least if they are also on social media, which 99% of the sponsors you're going to encounter are on social media, and they are paying attention to that. Social media still has a lot of value to bring. It's still the most cost-effective marketing platform out there, although it's gotten more expensive to play in the social media world. It's still a huge fundamental thing that motorsports marketing and sponsorship people need to be paying attention to. The next one is storytelling. I think it becomes a little bit more important for people who cannot be as visible at, say, a racetrack, but storytelling is massive. If you're going out to racetrack and you can also tell the story, like, you got it. You got it figured out. Next is events, face-to-face activities, meetings, getting out there with your sponsors in their booths, maybe having a booth of your own, but getting out there face-to-face and, seeing the products, seeing the people, seeing the fans. It's just for every one of these. Doesn't matter. It applies. Vehicle wraps, stickers, apparel, any one of those things, it's fundamental. I think that there's a little bit more leeway as you move into the destination capability vehicles and the show vehicles, from the standpoint that there may be some expectations around, especially for show vehicles, what type of finish that they have. If you're going for a car that is full restoration, then maybe slapping a bunch of logos on the side is not going to make sense. But the vehicle you tow it with, maybe that does. Or maybe the trailer you put it in, right? There's certain elements here that I think are just a general expectation. If you think about like the sports world in general, I think there's just a general expectation that company logos are visible on or around you. And I think, in this world, motorsports, we put the focus a lot of times on the vehicle itself. So it's a pretty fundamental element. The next one is content creation. A lot of times this goes along with social media, but making podcasts, making YouTube videos, making stunning imagery, all that stuff plays in pretty strongly. And the last one here, and I didn't hit on all of these throughout in the nuance section, but, contracts and expectations. Now, not everybody is going to have a contract, but everybody will have an expectation. And as the sponsored rider or racer or influencer, you need to be prepared to understand those contracts, understand those expectations, and ultimately deliver on them. Doesn't matter what discipline you're a part of, that is critical. Okay, so just a recap here. The things that we really covered were, the nuances between the different types of racing programs, whether it's desert, track with multi-racers, track with time attacker one-on-one, and then the non-racing type activities, the show vehicles, the backcountry riders and racers, and then the destination and capability vehicles. All these things kind of line up with fundamental elements, though, of a strong sponsorship program. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by AMSOIL. Make sure that you subscribe, that way you don't miss any of our upcoming shows. And follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And then pay specific attention to our Facebook page. That's where we do our live shows to get insider access into upcoming guests, and also ask questions and just learn best practices from the group of listeners that are out there. You can check out the Sponsored Rider Club on Facebook. A special thanks goes out to our partners, AMSOIL, SolderWeld, Bold Racing, TopThePodium.com, and Crash Addict Industries. And I also want to shout out our other partners, GSP XTV, MBRP, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, and High Octane Coffee. I look forward to serving you again next week. Until then, have fun and ride safe.